I started out as an academic scientist. I had a passion for discovery, passion for research, and a passion for uncovering things that humankind didn't know. I was a biologist, started as a marine biologist, and moved into medical sciences. I gravitated toward basic research, but in the late 90s, while I was at Harvard Med as a professor, I became very interested in what is now called translational medicine, which is helping patients, helping everyday people, helping the world with the great scientific discoveries that are out there. And in the late 90s, I had a cousin with ALS and my father had Parkinson's. So I grew very interested in neurological diseases.
Hello, I'm John Brink and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people that wonder we know where Canada is, we know where British Columbia is, where is Prince George? Well, it's about 500 miles north of Vancouver. And for our friends in Europe, that means about 800 kilometers. That puts it in the center of British Columbia. Big province, beautiful, lots of nature. Today, extremely precious day today because we have a special guest. It is Dr. Steve Gullans, and he is an amazing individual. Would you mind if I call you Steve, Doc?
Please do.
Okay, so and he's also known actually as Ted Med, and then Ted X, as in his bio he mentioned. So he has an amazing background because he is a doc, obviously, and a very prestigious one, but also he is an author, a speaker, and has a history in entrepreneurship, obviously, and has a history as studied or taught at Harvard University and a whole lot of other things. So, Doc, Steve, tell us about your background and what brought you to today.
Yeah, what brought me to today? It's an interesting journey. It's great to be here, and thank you very much. I even looked up where you live on the map today. It's I'm sure it's a beautiful place. Thank you. I started out as an academic scientist. I had a passion for discovery, passion for research, and a passion for uncovering things that humankind didn't know. I was a biologist, started as a marine biologist, and moved into medical sciences. I gravitated toward basic research, but in the late 90s, while I was at Harvard Med as a professor, I became very interested in what is now called translational medicine, which is helping patients, helping everyday people, helping the world with the great scientific discoveries that are out there. And in the late 90s, I had a cousin with ALS and my father had Parkinson's. So I grew very interested in neurological diseases. At the time, I was using the latest genomics technologies. I was one of the few labs in the world that had it. And I decided, well, let's go after ways to actually try to find treatments, diagnostics, and other things. I bumped into a stone wall when I applied for basic research funds at the NIH, where the idea of helping patients was not core to their philosophy at that time. I will say it's changed a great deal since then. At that time, I had high school students grinding up pills from the pharmacy, so we would test every existing safe drug against any disease, and I would share it everywhere. I also had genomic sequencing technologies. We sequenced the first cancer genome funded by some surgeons because, again, it was too early days. And we went around the world. We went actually to Malaysia to get the informatics done because they were well ahead of all the academic institutions with neural networks at the time.
When I applied for grants, when would that have been, Steve?
1998 to 2002 would have been where that's going on.
About 20 years ago.
At the time, I was having to raise money in Hollywood and Wall Street because academic grant agencies weren't seeing the great value. I was willing to share the drugs, for example. At one point, my grant was not even reviewed. It was considered to outside the mainstream, and then a director at the NIH called that asked to collaborate at the time, which I disagreed with. I didn't do, but that was those were early days of what was called translational medicine. So I actually left the lab to seek greener pastures in terms of how do we actually bridge this gap from discovery, because I know lots of great scientists whose heart fundamentally is in helping the world.
Right.
And I went in, I learned I ran a couple of companies, and then I opened a venture capital fund with my friend and co-author Juan Enriquez, who had also been at Harvard Business School, to invest in life science technologies. We ran a venture capital fund for a little over 10 years. And in that process, I discovered from the lab bench to Wall Street how the entire evolution occurs and where the soul and events occur that make things happen for real. And that's where my heart is.
You in fact wrote a book together with your friend, right? And
we did.
And the title of the book is Evolving Ourselves?
Evolving Ourselves. It's several years old. And it really tells the story of how humans are evolving today before our eyes. The traditional Darwinian approach, which he didn't know DNA existed. He just knew there was change and variation and selection. But eventually DNA got embedded as the mechanism where you have mutations and things change. Well, that is far too slow for nature to react. And there's plenty of evidence that in a single generation, a species, the progeny of a species in a drought or even Darwin's finches can change. And so now we're seeing in everyday life, why is there so much ADHD? Why are there so many allergies? Why are kids actually getting smarter? Why are people so tall? We assume that these are very simple genetic things, but we have our genomes are influenced by our environment, including by the environment of our parents and grandparents, leaving signatures that say, you're coming into a world that's a little different than your mother, so be prepared. And since we didn't evolve to create ADHD or anxiety and things like that, but somehow our ancient mechanisms have come into play and misinterpreted the world we live in. We have daylight 16 hours a day. We have plenty of food. We're driving at high speeds. We're in airplanes. We have so many things going on. Our bodies weren't made for that.
Right. Are they adjusting to it then? The interesting part, I was born in Holland, Steve. And as you likely know, a lot of Holland is below sea level. And I have a lot of people say to me, how come that statistically the people in Holland are the tallest people in the world? I say, well, yeah, that's not scientific. I said that's because they're below sea level. Nature has accommodated him. No, I'm just kidding. But
no, I love it.
I find it
and there's
interesting.
There's no single gene. There's at least 40 genes that contribute to height. But we know if you have two parents who played professional basketball, there's a good chance you're going to be tall.
Right.
And so we know there's a hereditary component. But you add on to that our environmental influence. And in fact, Holland is very interesting. In the Second World War, there was actually a famine. And the genetic changes that babies in utero felt at that time, not mutations, just modifications, led to different mental health conditions as those new babies grew up.
So interesting you say that, because I was born in northeastern Holland in 1940 at the start of the Second World War. I still remember the hunger winter of 1944-45. There was hunger winter, and it was the coldest winter on record. And I remember I was around 5. My sister was 1 year older, my brother 2 years older. And in the mornings, we would go with gunny sacks, the three of us, into the railroad yards, pick up anything edible or burnable, And the reason that we did as kids, because the Germans wouldn't shoot us. They put us one in the back and be back the following morning. But I tell that to a lot of people, even now still, I'm approaching 84, so 79 years later, I still feel the feeling of hunger is still with me. I still feel the cold because my mom was on her own. My dad was lost during the war, or called into the Dutch army, and was caught in the bombing of Rotterdam. So they didn't know if he was dead or alive until 5 years later. And so we had just a small room where we had a little heater, and I still can feel that. And then the bombers overhead, the Allied bombers bombing Germany, hundreds of them, and then in the evenings, my mother would take us outside, not because to look at all the bombers overhead, but she felt safer outside than inside. As a result of that, I still have PTSD, and I still was affected by the inner child, the fear of losing that protective parent. Got counseling for it actually when I was in my 50s, very emotional. And the points that you're making, very much so, all of that still stayed with me, and it's still there with me, inside of me. And I'm not sure in which way, but I was affected by it. There's no question about that.
So what you describe is something that is part of our evolutionary history and experience. The idea of famine, weather changes, even look in Ukraine and the Middle East right now. The devastation. It is not just mental, it's physical. So every hormone in your body is going crazy. You go on a starvation diet, maybe there's a surplus 1 year because of bounty of harvest. Nature has figured out that to survive as a species, you don't just survive this week, you pass on beneficial traits to your kids. So as a result, when you live in a cold environment, you're going to be born as someone who's more tolerant of cold weather. If you live in a place where there's not much food, you're going to have what's called an epigenetic fingerprint that survives that. We don't have strong data in humans because, frankly, we haven't had the technology to measure that. And it's very hard to do things transgenerationally. But we have lots of evidence in animals. We know it's conserved pathways. And so as you go through any episode in life, it's not just you, what you feel, but what's actually changing you. It's your kids and grandkids. It's something called transgenerational heredity that you can pass on through different generations. And it's something that's completely unappreciated. But it is, as we look at all the reason people are changing, we have to point a finger at our environment, but not this week some toxin that we're ingesting, but just some environmental influence that was not natural, or maybe it was, and we're just adapting to it.
Exactly. So are we, and you referred to that 21 years ago and early 2000s, when a lot of things were not thought about or spent money on or considered to be important. Are we making positive changes, Steve? And are we becoming more knowledgeable in a lot of areas and implementing them, hopefully for health and longevity and all of those things for quality of life?
The answer is yes. I would encourage people to take a look at our book called Evolving Ourselves to see many domains of life through real people's experiences that are being impacted. The revolution that I'm part of is the Biotech Revolution, across all the way from healthcare to energy, environment, all the places that living organisms and animal and plant proteins can play a role. And I've been giving a lecture over the last couple of years about the parallels between the IT revolution and the biotech revolution. The IT revolution began in 1945 with the ENIAC computer. 2 years later, we had the first transistor at Bell Labs. But we didn't have the first computer chip until 1971. And then 1973 was what I view as the dawn of the biotech industry and technology. It was the transfer of a single gene from one bacterium to another, not even a different species. And we had lots of anxiety about whether it was safe, whether we would do it. Now it's routine globally, even in high school labs, you can do that. But that 28-year lag, let's just take that as an analogy. So by the mid 70s, Apple started, Microsoft started. We were now 40 years, or 30 years into that IT revolution, and nobody owned a computer. Nobody knew what an internet was. Nobody knew anything about that. It wasn't until the early 90s.
Television. When I was in Holland, we didn't have. We had in our little town in Holland, and they had the first television, and say everybody went down there, and you looked at it, and it snowed, and then vaguely you saw individuals.
And think about that in today's world. What's it going to be like in another 50 years? So by the 2000, we had hit the dot-com bubble, but at that point, we'd been on the internet for just only 6 years. The first e-commerce showed up in 91, the very first transaction. So if biotech is 28 years behind, it's no different. We had to sequence the genome. We had to invent technologies, even genetic transfer techniques. We had to get all of this stuff done, and now we're seeing it come out of its shell. So we're at the equivalent of the early 90s right now. 28 years ago would be the equivalent. We saw evidence with COVID, 11 months from the sequence to an in-your-arm vaccine is unprecedented, and it's not unique to that. There are many technologies that are burgeoning like that. The number of drugs approved by the FDA in the U.S. last year was 57. From 1938 to 2015, it was 25 to 30 every single year.
Right.
And then, boom, it's taken off because the technologies have arrived, are mature. We have, just like having the infrastructure of the computer IT revolution, where you have the internet, you have everything, we can now see it. So the same way you could not envision an app on a phone in 1995, imagine you said, I'm going to start an app company, I'm going to get rich, or a video gaming company. People wouldn't know what you were talking about. We have the same thing right in front of us now in the biotech revolution across all sectors. Now, I'm an optimist about this. I do teach bioethics. I was just on a panel last week about the future of human enhancements in Paris with the OECD. And it's an interesting time.
So I have to then ask you the question, how about artificial intelligence, or as we know it, AI? And a lot of people are worried about it. I believe, from a layperson perspective, the genie is out of the bottle. It will not go back. And at the end, we will benefit from it, because as we adapt to using AI technology, then it will again be something at the level likely of inventing the computer, in my mind.
Absolutely, and it may go well beyond that. This idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI, where a machine can think like you, is pretty extraordinary. I'm not an AI expert. I do listen to a podcast almost every day about AI because I want to keep abreast of what's going on, because I want to see what's coming.
Right.
AI is touching every field. Biotech's not unique. In fact, it will accelerate what I've already said. 57 drugs will become 157, then 357. And then we're going to break the bank if we don't find a way to differently price things. And so I would agree with you totally that AI is having an impact on everything. I remain an optimist in my domain of biology simply because people talk about engineering organisms and everything else. It is so easy today to go to Africa and get some Ebola or whatever you want, or even just mouth and foot disease organisms, and just contaminate the world with things that already naturally exist. And we're not seeing that. Right. There are a lot of safeguards in place as someone tries to manufacture, a horrible bacterium in the sequencing world and things. But we do have to be vigilant. We do have to set rules. And the conference I was just at, which is the OECD, which is a European group, that tries to establish or propose standards of proper ethical and lawful behavior in new burgeoning technologies, where I was, is trying to get out in front of it. So our brain is the next target. We already know social media has taken over so much of our lives.
Is that you talking now about neurology as the
I'm
brain?
talking about neurology. For the last 7 years, been on a crusade to identify and bring forward brain training technologies. If AI is going to be here, we better keep up.
Yeah,
What better way than to train our brain? If we go
right,
back, if we go back to the great scientists uh, uh, from the 1800s, Sir Lord Kelvin, he said very clearly, if you do not measure it, you cannot improve it. Now,
exactly.
I know you're very, very healthy. You're a competitive weightlifter. I'm sure you know every number you could possibly know about your body. Tell me
Right.
what number you know today about your brain.
Not
That's
very
beautiful.
much.
What
I,
number you can tell me your blood pressure, you can tell me your cholesterol,
yeah,
you can tell me how much you can lift, you can tell me how fast you run a mile.
yeah,
What number do you know about your brain? And yet you expect it to get better? So where we are right now in the technologies I'm working with, and we would just start a new company called Think, Thynk, which is just using a very simple headset
right,
to monitor your brain waves. It is as passive as using a watch to
right.
detect your. There is nothing collected and stored. We take less data than your watches take for your thing, and we control a video game with your brain waves to
Right.
train you how to focus and pay attention.
Yeah. So that is all being developed or understood first, and then technology is built around it. But what troubles me sometimes, Steve, is I'm in Canada. We
Right?
have a health system that is universality. Everybody gets
Right?
the same. And then you are in the US, the health system is different.
Right?
And I don't want to say it's bad here, but it tends to be more advanced in the United States, moving more into areas that are looking forward. Here now, one of our biggest problems is not enough medical doctors, and then we are being not proactive but reactive more, and
Right? Right? Right?
so
Yeah.
it then becomes a question of what do we do with all the complexities that are going on in the world and the changes that are taking place in persons. It becomes a question of we have a lot of people that are not healthy, and fitness is one, but the other part is that a lot of people do not have a medical doctor. So my
Yeah.
question to you is that our system is different than the United States, but are we going elsewhere now as well with the medical system, that I'm sitting here in Prince George in
Mm-hmm.
central British Columbia, 800 kilometers or 500 miles north of Vancouver. I'm talking now at this moment to one of the, and I'm not trying to make you feel good, but am one of the most prominent medical uh, scientists and biologists in North America, if not in the world, and we can interact here. And as we do that, tens of thousands of people are watching us live today, but also tomorrow at podcasting. Is that where we going partially? I'm not talking about this media now, but I'm talking about the medical system as to how do we get more interaction between the public, and rather than running to the doctor's office and sitting there waiting in the office, do we have to go beyond this? Because what we have now today, at least, and I'm not being critical, I'm simply saying that too often we see that it
Mm-hmm.
appears to me we're not being effective in what we can do and having access to
You put
medical.
your finger on the number one problem in the brain health space. We've had EEG technology for 150 years. Someone tried to measure ESP waves, discovered they were very short distance, and they didn't work. We have decades of research on how the brain signals, not just EEG, but many other things. These are non-invasive. You can just look at blood flow. You can go to an MRI. You get to an EEG. The other thing that's happened, and I'll come to your question in a moment, is we've had an enormous decrease in the cost of technology thanks to our cell phones.
Yeah.
And as a result, the headset that we use for our technology is very inexpensive. If you go to the hospital and get an EEG scan, which is 100% non-toxic and safe, that machine is thousands and thousands of dollars and needs a technician to set it up. We just a 7-year-old can just pop it on their head and play a video game by thinking, and it's less than $100 eventually when we get to high scale, and there's nothing wrong with it. So right now, what's the problem, which is what you were talking about, is how we perceive these technologies as useful in the world. Right now, I can tell you to a person, because I'm out proselytizing every scientist and clinician I know, stop thinking about disease. You do need to get a subscription or prescription from your doctor to buy a watch, to measure your pulse. Did you ask the insurance company to pay $5,000 for your watch? Why do we do that with technologies for our brain? Sure, if it's invasive, like Elon Musk is doing, of course, but those have been around for decades.
Yeah.
So I've talked to people who have technologies that just look at your eye movement, and it's not just sensitivity to detect diseases, but it's also teaching kids how to read better. Right. It's monitoring whether someone whose voice is not working well, how they can actually use a cryptic alphabet. We have to get rid of the model that requires everybody to think it's got to be going through a healthcare indication. No, we work on focus. We work on attention, impulse control. These are the major traits of ADHD. Who do we sell to? Anybody tomorrow.
Right.
And we've proven it works in the hardest to treat population, but it also works on everybody else. And if you consider, just take the weight loss drugs. Why did they test them on obese people? Because they need some help, but they work on skinny people too.
Yeah.
These are universal mechanisms, but here if you put nothing in there's actually earbuds that can listen to your heart and your body and really tell you where your autonomic nervous system is. There's so many cool technologies that are now inexpensive that if you just said, coming back to you, if everybody in your town had access to some monitoring technologies and you just downloaded the apps on your phone, we're in the app store, you just download it, but you have to have a headset. You start to learn where your mind is. It could be around vision, hearing, anything, dementia, all of these things are measurable. And then you could train to do better, like you do with weightlifting or calming yourself, meditation. These are all at hand today. So the answer is yes, we can bridge all of these health things across the world, not the most severe health issues. No. But when you're recovering from a concussion, you're recovering from traumatic brain injury, why wouldn't you want to know the day that your brain is starting to become alert again?
Exactly. So is it a question of an amazing amount of information is already there and more so all the time? How do we get it to the public, at least gradually into them and available, and saying we can see it on YouTube, we see information, from reputable, credible individuals,
So I think it's about being open-minded. You need to have people like you who are thought leaders, willing to try something. I'm very candid. In fact, I've been involved in a lot of pharmaceutical trials. There are always non-responders, always. There's no drug that works 100% of the time on 100% of people. Right. But many companies don't want to identify them because it means they'll sell fewer But the first month, you prescribe to everyone, and then you see if it works.
Yeah.
But if people started trying this and finding uses for it, so we're actually testing in, I don't care about ADHD rating scales anymore. I care about how is their math score? How's their reading score? How are they behaving at school? How is their, in hockey, how well is the goalie focusing? These are the things we're measuring now. So that's what people are going to learn is, oh my God, I'm going to be a better goalie if I try this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the interesting part for me is that I was not an academic success. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so I came to Canada. We were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945. It made such an impression on me that I said I knew I would go to the land of my heroes as soon as I could. And then I wanted to go when I was 17, and my parents wouldn't let me, so I was drafted in Holland in the Air Force. And then when I came out, I worked in the lumber industry, and then I went to Canada when I was 23. Couldn't speak didn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, and didn't have a job. And by the time I got to Vancouver, went to the immigration office, I had a dream. I wanted to build a lumber mill. And he said, go to Prince George, it's a boomtown, that's where they have lumber mills. So I got one on the bus. I had one suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money, and at least 3 times. I can still see the Greyhound station here close by. I had exactly $35.47. But what I had lots of is attitude. I avoid the negative. I don't want to have part of it. No matter how tough today is, I know tomorrow's going to be better. I had passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%. And work ethic. I work harder than anybody, even nearly 84. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed. I'm always in a hurry. I always think I'm late. And today, I'm not bragging about the companies that I have, but I have a lumber company and 10 other companies. I became an author at late in life, and I was 62. I have 4 books, and I'm writing 2 other ones, and I'm a keynote speaker on many occasions. And then, obviously, I'm an active on podcasting, and I love it. And and
just imagine if your school teachers saw you now, what would they say?
They would say they couldn't believe it. I say ADHD, it's a superpower. And I wrote a book about it, ADHD Unlocked. And the other one that I was going to mention to you is of interest is that you are podcast number 250. Now, when I came to Prince George, I already, it was in 1997, I was 57 years old already, and I walked into a bookstore here, and I picked up a book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. I still don't know why I picked it up. I picked it up, I opened the book, written by Dr. Halliwell, and it was about ADHD. I'd never even heard of it. And the more I read about it, I said, oh my God, that's me. And I wrote in that book in Dutch because I was ashamed of it, because it was implied it was likely a mental issue. So I wrote that now I finally know who I am. So the more I found out about it, and it comes to what the comment that you made earlier, I implied that in the book, in Google and the things that I looked at, that probably 8% of the population ADHD. The more I saw of it, the more I believed it is more than probably 20%. Now with my podcast with Mr. Dr. Halliwell, talked about On the Brink 2003, very interesting. I mentioned it to him, and he said, no, John, it's more than 25%. And then the other thing, and I agree with them, and then the other thing I said to him is that, I believe from all my interaction with senior executives and all the other things that I've done, that, and looking around, that with successful CEOs, and the operative is successful. In entrepreneurs, I said to Dr. Halliwell that I believe at least 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, at least 75%. And that comes to the comment that you made early in our conversation.
Yeah, and I have two things I want to chat about on that comment. One is ADHD is defined by an arbitrary number and an arbitrary subjective questionnaire. There's nothing measured.
No.
So are you saying, if someone is 129 IQ, they're not a genius because they're not 130? If someone's blood pressure is 141, they're not eligible for, 139, they're not eligible for a drug to bring it down to 129. These cutoffs are arbitrary. That's why you got to get away from the medical completely. ADHD implies medical. I try to stop using that term completely.
Exactly.
The point is, if you are we've actually tested kids who are superstar brilliant, and they test off the charts after we teach them how to focus. That's what we're teaching. It's not a deficiency. It's wherever you are, you can improve.
But ADHD is a disorder, implies a deficiency. I said, no, it isn't. It's a superpower. It allows
right
you
now
to...
in the medical world, it enables you to get a therapeutic drug that's paid for by a company. What I'm saying is, if we start to take control of our own brains, like we do with our own diets and our own body weight, we can actually begin to do things that are beneficial with simple technologies.
Exactly.
So let me make one comment about your comment as an immigrant. I am a huge fan of immigrant. Every day I carry with me my grandfather's wedding ring. He came to America at the age of 16 as an orphan because he knew that the Russians, he used to call them the Bolsheviks, are going to invade Finland, and I'll be conscripted into the Russian army.
Yeah.
He had no parents. He'd only been a farmer. He came here, literally no money, nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm here because of him. So I've hired and worked with many, many immigrants. I still do. And I am a huge fan of the work ethic and everything else that goes with it. The passion that comes with it is extraordinary.
But I feel a lot of times that I appreciate those comments because there are many, many examples of that. Is that I say to a lot of people in a general sense that that if I look at the world right now and I look at the Ukraine and the things that are happening there in the Middle East, obviously, and those things. Yeah. But I was there in when Hitler, the dictator, overtook Europe, and the results of the hunger winter and all the people that were dragged out of their houses and never returned, and all those other things. And then what I do, Steve, I fly around a lot in North America, and I'm a pilot myself too, but usually commercial. I always sit by the window and I look outside and I say, it's paradise. It is paradise.
I agree.
And then I say, for those people that are the naysayers, I say, what do you want to do? You want to go to Russia, to Putin, or you want to go to China? You want to go to North Korea? You want to go to Iran? You want to go to Venezuela, Hungary, maybe even Cuba, all those places? I said, I say the democratic system is not perfect. It tends to be messy. Compared to the United States, our political system is boring, but yours is probably too exciting in some cases, but still, common sense will prevail hopefully in November, and whatever will happen, the experiment of democratic countries, of a democratic rule, and the Constitution of the United States 250 years ago was started, and it started, I believe, is we the people. And it is an example to the rest of the world. And for those people that think that it failed, it's still the rest of the world looks at the United States as the example of democratic rule. And I believe that the opposite, I've seen it, I felt it, and it goes, the people that are part of all these wars, it is not the war is over and now everything goes back to normal. It doesn't. It may take generations,
My wife's family came from communist Poland, and they felt the worst of the worst. But coming back to your comment about, North America and the privilege you're talking about of being here, I'm a huge American fan for many reasons. But when I travel, like you, I was just in Paris, for example. Everybody wants to be like us if they can't be here. So when you think about the technologies, who's going to adopt these first? I guarantee that Harvard's going to be the last place to start saying, go try this headset or go try these earbuds to improve your mind. I talk with people from South America, from Africa, who said, we're not near the top of the world in education. We're not near the top of the world in a lot of things. We're all in. If we can afford it, bring it on.
Yeah.
And I was very excited by that because it's now a global community for things like this. And you're going to see that going back to the biotech revolution, as we get more and more drugs and the prices come down, are you really going to depend on your doctor and your insurance company to decide what's your best interest and best health? No. You're going to go travel wherever you need to go to get what you think is best for you.
And I believe that too. And you have to be proactive in terms of saying, that, and it is not magic, that, and better than anybody, but I've already learned, hence my book that is coming out in June or July, Living Young, Dying Old. The word is not age is just a number. No, it's quality of life that counts. And I know I was not always like that, but at the latter parts, thanks to my wife more than anything, because she is a vegetarian. I'm vegan. I call myself 90-10 in that area. And the interesting part, I do the shopping for her, and she trusts me. And I go into the store and I go through the outside because I'm looking mainly for organic plant food, and I'm not very much in what is in the center of the store, processed food. I don't know what's the process, so that sort of thing. So, and I'm go to the gym. I don't want to be a bodybuilder. That's not the idea. But motivates me to go to the gym and be healthy, and so that's what I want to do.
Well, you're remarkably healthy. And what are you doing to keep your brain healthy?
Being on podcasting and writing and running 10 companies.
To be on your game, I agree. It's being on the spot takes some work.
And I love it because I can see it on your bio. You have an amazing background into being so active on, as being a professor at Harvard and studying and being an in-demand speaker and doing... So your life must be very, very busy as well, Steve.
Yeah, and I take a lot of pleasure. I pick and choose what I do like you do. I take a lot of pleasure in helping young entrepreneurs. And I bump into actually quite a few immigrants that need some help. They have a passion about, it could be autism or just advancing, research technologies. And I coach a lot of people because that's really the future. It's not just educating, it's feeding this passion with some knowledge. This is how you raise money. This is how the patent system works. They learn like that because they know they want to do this. And I've taught many entrepreneurial classes where I say, most people I know in my field are born with a disease called entrepreneuritis. And it never goes away. You have it your whole life. You're stuck in all these startup and early companies. But you love every day. You've been through it. You know what it's like in the early days. It looks easy when you're on the other side of the early days. Everybody says, that couldn't be so hard. But think about all the technologies that went nowhere. Exactly.
I wrote this book, Against All Odds. It's not about how successful John is, just the opposite. Falling down, standing up, and going through it. But I love it. It's, the part of the...
And along the way, you find mentors and allies. And I give to many, many entrepreneurs, I give to my team, it's called Stone Soup. It's a very, very old children's tale about some soldiers. It looks like it's in the 1800s in Europe, coming to a town and the townspeople hide all the food and all the animals and all the bedding and everything else because they know they're going to be plundered. And the soldiers say, no, we're making stone soup. They boil a kettle of water, throw the stones in, and say, oh, this would taste better with a little onion. I got onion. So everything I do in life is stone soup. I come up with an idea because I may have heard it from you or anyone. I say, what the heck? Let's just go.
Yeah.
And everybody starts throwing, and that's what I'm experiencing at Think. That's what I'm experiencing with these entrepreneurs. You join my bandwagon. If you don't want, fine. You'll be on the other side of success. Someday you'll get to it.
So the other part now, you're quite involved in the one company that that started in 2008.
Yeah, 2008. So you're talking about that was Excel Venture Management. That was my venture capital fund. We managed $225 million. As I told everybody, I have so many friends with great ideas and no money. I'm going to get the money first this time. And that was the joy when I did it with Juan. I discovered a lot about the business of making drugs. In general, I got the technologies right, but and I'd say our firm did too, but we didn't always get the markets right. You know, when you have COVID or something, you know, there's macro events. There's also adversarial events in terms of the big players. But there's brilliant technology. It just doesn't always get there. And the things I've learned are the things that I'm trying to give back, whether it's teaching or coaching or anything else. At the end of the day, we always have people like you who are going to say, why not? Let's get it done. And we're going to have a few people join them. And the one thing that the Biotech Revolution has that the IT Revolution didn't have 28 years earlier, we have the hurdles of regulatory and everything else, but we have the benefit of venture capital. That did not exist in the early days of IT.
No.
Now we could actually, when you see a good idea, you can drive it with a lot of money. And I'll tell you right now, the next generation of therapeutic drugs are going to get to become much, much safer than we ever thought was possible.
Yeah.
Some of the new immuno-oncology drugs have no side effects at the doses they're effective. They just don't work on everybody.
Right. So what will be the key there to what we see now, Canada, United States, in a general sense that drugs are very expensive a lot of times, especially for the newer type of drugs. So where is that going?
So, well, there's a lot of pressure to lower the price. As I said, as the number of drugs that get approved every year doubles and doubles and doubles, it's a fixed amount of money that's going to spend. So you will see increased efficiencies. The traditional model of a very large company discovering it, developing it, running clinical trials, and selling it, that model is broken. You don't see any IT company build their own computer chip and then build a desktop application that the whole world wants to use. It's all been segregated. So we have that today in a general sense, and the pharmacists have started to move that way, but everybody's going to be within their domain saying, I sell drugs at low prices globally. And it's really about opening up the global market and getting prices down. And you've seen that the GLP-1 drugs, they can be manufactured for under $10.
Right.
The price eventually will fall a lot when the patents disappear. It's not the patents. It's just the way we all approach it and think about it, to be honest. It's a broader conversation.
So then the other part that I sometimes see is people that have a whole handful of drugs that they have to. Now, in a lot of cases, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that field, but it appears like the comments on it is that for some of the drugs that they take, for every problem they solve, they create 3 or 4 other ones. So how does that all go in the future?
So I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I missed it.
So I know some of the people that have a whole hands full of drugs that they take on a daily basis or whatever they do. And
so what's happening is going back to Lord Kelvin. If you measure it, you can improve it. Right. I measure my blood pressure every day, and I take hypertension drugs. And unlike anybody else that I know, I adjust the levels of my drugs to fit the diet I've had. If I've had a lot of salt, it's going to be up. I measure my blood pressure. I take a little bit less that day. All right?
Right.
That should be the and you do that already in many aspects of your life. You test and you adjust. You test. Yeah. And so as a result, that's the kind of mentality we have to have. You take responsibility for what you're doing. And the idea of having passive sensors like your watch or wristbands or earbuds is going to be ubiquitous. So you're going to get an alert that says, there's something going on with your hearing. Why don't you check it? And things like that. And maybe there's even going to be a training tool that teaches you how to improve it. But with your medicine, how do you know when you're taking vitamin D just over the counter whether you have enough or not? I actually took 5 times the dose for a week just to make sure the test worked, because I got the same number every time. And it worked great. But I was always at the low end.
So that worked. So how would you say that, if I look at myself, I don't really take any drugs, a little bit for high blood pressure. But I'm again very careful. I measure it, and I make sure that I'm fit. I do, from a doc's perspective, I do an annual. I buy that separately, bumper to bumper, from an annual, and then I'm being proactive, and I'm careful with my diet. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do any of that kind of stuff.
So, there's a few things. We don't have, one of the reasons that being on top of diagnosing everything all the time doesn't work is we don't have enough different ways to manipulate the system, and we just aren't comfortable doing it yet. But imagine you're coming back, you're jet lagged, and you'd like to get some sleep. If there was something you could measure that tell you melatonin is going to work or not work because you measured the melatonin levels in your blood or in somehow, you'd say, then I'll pop a melatonin. But that's what I'm short of. I talk about in some of my lectures a mystery organ that I want to create, which is cells that are tuned to create all the hormones in our body, but only let them out because it's all regulated at the same level as our mid-20s. So that could be, for example, you hear about low testosterone like that's a disease. That's just normal aging. But you have all of these growth factors, nerve growth factor, you have IGF, you have EGF, you have all of these factors that are slowly declining. And if we could just maintain them, not be a superstar, hitting home runs, but just live a normal life, there will be a generation that won't age, and we're going to see that.
And that's the direction really we are going, correctly?
Absolutely. All we need to see, and we've seen this already in this field, is you take Botox or cosmetics. But I talked to this former CEO who first launched this, and we thought it would be $25 million global market because it was for a rare muscular problem. Well, sure enough, it gets rid of wrinkles and it goes, multi-billions of dollars. What got it there? 2 things, safety and price. Once everybody knows something's safe and it's affordable. The other thing, how do you pick price? I say, well, look at plastic surgery. No insurance company pays for a facial. It's all under $10,000.
Right.
And so beauty and performance are the 2 places that come first because people are willing to risk a little safety when they're in their 80s, bluntly, compared to somebody in their 20s. And affordability. So I do know some billionaires who get on jets and go to other countries to get stem cell therapy that might keep them younger.
Right. Does it work?
The jury's out. I've talked to the scientists. I read that literature every day, actually, to see what's working. And, I'm looking at the supplements. There's no drugs, but it's a natural biological phenomenon like aging is, just like, evolution. We will figure it out.
Yeah. And so what I sometimes say, tongue in cheek, they say to me, why are you writing the book? Well, I want to share with the world is, staying fit, and then that age is just a number. And then if you take care of your body, don't abuse it. The body is very forgiving and wants to be healthy, and don't do crazy stuff, then I want to be 120.
it's not just lifespan, it's health span. It's how long you're healthy, and you're living that. It's wonderful.
Quality of life.
Absolutely.
Dr. Steve,
Don't forget to train your brain and take care of your brain. It has options too, like lifting weights. Let's do it here.
I agree with you 100%. It was an amazing podcast, Steve. Let's make sure we stay in touch. And again,
Yes.
it was a privilege to have you on my podcast.
Thank you, John. A real joy. I really enjoyed meeting you. I'll stay in touch.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.